The gentleman yields to Ms. Titus.
Thank you. At this time, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask unanimous consent to enter some things into the record. First, a record of the Texas Tribune article titled, Texas Border Republican Accuses GOP of Using Immigration Crisis for Politics, in which committee member and Republican representing an actual border district, Mr. Gonzalez, rightly points out that Republicans are politicizing the border for political gain. I also ask unanimous consent to include in the record a CBS News article in which Republican Congressman...
Let's rule on the first one.
Oh, sure.
With no objection, so ordered. Okay.
Excuse me. I now ask unanimous consent to include in the record a CBS News article in which Republican Congressman Tom McClintock calls Congresswoman Green's impeachment push against Secretary Mayorkas I quote, new and unconstitutional abuse of power, end quote.
With no objection, so ordered.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I ask unanimous consent to include in the record a Bloomberg News article entitled Mayorkas Uproar Puts DHS in Familiar Spot as Political Football, describing how the Republicans' sham impeachment against Secretary Mayorkas is threatening the ability of DHS employees and officers to do their job, disrupting DHS operations and hurting their ability to recruit.
Without objection, so ordered.
I now ask unanimous consent to include in the record an op-ed by Michael Chertoff, published just this week, entitled Don't Impeach Alejandro Mayorkas, in which the former Bush-era DH secretary says, quote, House Republicans are misusing the process to target an official who has done nothing wrong. Political and policy disagreements aren't impeachable offenses, end quote.
Without objection, so ordered.
I now ask you, Mr. Chairman, for unanimous consent to include in the record a letter entitled Opposition to the Impeachment of Secretary Mayorkas from Former DHS Officials, in which 26 former DHS officials, including numerous officials who served in the Republican administration, urged the committee not to impeach the secretary because the sham impeachment, quote, not only threatens to undermine national security, but sets a perilous precedent that could have dire implications for the stability of our government, end quote.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
I got two more. You want me to wait?
You got 13 seconds.
Oh, I ask unanimous consent to include in the record a News Channel 5 national article entitled Representative Green on Impeachment. I can't imagine the founders support anything like this, which demonstrates that Chairman Green had a different standard for the impeachment process of then President Trump.
Without objection, so ordered. And the time is up. I now recognize Mr. Correa for 5 minutes to discuss the NAS.
Chairman, before I begin with the amendment that I'm going to present, I'd like to, with unanimous consent, include to the record a number of articles. First one, United Nations High Commission for Refugees Global Trends Report for 2022. Next article.
Without objection, so ordered.
An article from the Center of Strategic International Studies titled Persistence of the Venezuelan Migrant and Refugee Crisis.
Without objection, so ordered.
Second article, Biden administration White House fact sheet, the Los Angeles Declaration on Migration and Protection.
Without objection, so ordered.
Next article, Biden administration has admitted more than 1 million migrants into the U.S. under parole policy. Congress is considering restricting.
Without objection, so ordered.
Next article, record from the New York Times, title For People Fleeing War, U.S. Immigration Fight Has Real-Life Consequences.
Without objection, so ordered.
Next article, USCIS processes Cuban, Haitians, Nicaraguans, and Venezuelans, that outlines that nationals from these countries can be paroled into the United States on a case-by-case basis.
Without objection, so ordered.
DHS FII 22-year in review, showing that Secretary Mayorkas put more personnel, technology, and infrastructure and resources on our borders.
Without objection, so ordered.
Forward U.S. George Mason University, that shows that the humanitarian parole programs helped to address our labor shortage and actually helped ease inflation.
Without objection, so ordered.
And last article from Axios titled Funding Deadlock Threatens to Make the Border Crisis Worse.
Without objection, so ordered.
I'd like to yield now to Mr. Golden. To Mr. Ivey.
Mr. Ivey, you're recognized.
I'll look the same.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Correa. I did want to reference my colleague from the Ethics Committee, Mr. Guest, drew a comparison between Mr. Santos and Mr. Mayorkas, which I thought was totally missed the mark. And so we pulled his statement he made on the floor at the time he offered the resolution to remove Mr. Santos from the Congress. I just want to point out a couple of things, since we're both on the Ethics Committee. This shows a stark contrast between what we did there and what's happening here today. First of all, the Ethics Committee moved in a bipartisan way. All of the members voted for the removal, or for the report supporting the removal of Mr. Santos, which I think led to supporting the legitimacy of the 2/3 vote that we got on the floor. By contrast, every vote here has been along party lines. And not only just today, I mean, when we voted on H.R. 2, and I think almost every other vote we've had here has been along partisan lines. The second big one, though, was the Ethics Committee did a very thorough investigation. And we went through 172,000 pages of documents, generated a 50-page investigative report, interviewed 40 witnesses. Compare that to what we've done here on a similar constitutional issue. I think they presented 3 states' attorney generals. My recollection is one of them didn't say anything as written testimony about impeachment.
Would the gentleman yield, though?
I'm not my time, and I'm running out of time.
Okay,
but,
okay.
2 made one-paragraph comments about impeachment as far as reaching the constitutional standard. And really the only witnesses we've had here that have talked about it have said that this does not rise to that standard. And we've submitted multiple versions of that from other constitutional scholars as well. Another big one, though, I think, too, is Mr. Santos's conduct was criminal, and he personally benefited from it. And those are the arguments that were generated by the report that we released. I think, as Mr. Guest said on the floor, Representative Santos sought to fraudulently exploit every aspect of his House candidacy for his own personal profit, blatantly stole from the campaign, deceived donors into providing what they thought were contributions. In fact, payments for his own personal benefit. We don't have anything like that with respect to Mr. Mayorkas. In fact, we don't have anything that reaches the constitutional standard that we've been discussing here today. And I think we've mentioned Mr. Chertoff. In fact, Ms. Titus just put that article in a few minutes ago, but he basically says all of that, impeachment's inappropriate here, and that Mr. Mayorkas, good public servant in a tough job. With that, I yield back, and thank you, Mr. Correa, for the time.
The gentleman yields. I now recognize Mr. Kane for 5 minutes of discussion on the ANS.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to yield my time to the chairman after stating that my name is actually Crane, not Kane. Thank you.
And you're from Texas, right? The gentleman yields to me. I want to just clarify here. We've got 400 pages of a report from 5 different phases of several months of digging into this. To imply that it was 3 states' attorneys general are only witnesses that have come before this committee and talked about the failure of the secretary to adhere to the laws passed by this Congress. That's not fair.
Will the gentleman yield?
No, I'm not going to yield. We haven't made a habit of that today, so I'm not either.
Whenever you're finished.
That's not what
Just for a question.
No. So I think it's really, we disagree. I think even if he was a Republican, if it's just elections and impeachment is for something different than this, you can have a cabinet secretary get in there and just do whatever the heck they want. And that's not what our founders intended. They did not intend for 3 separate equal branches of government where one writes the laws and another one executes it That somebody in this branch can just do whatever the heck they want. That makes no sense. It's not even intuitively obvious to a casual observer. And so there are people out there who say, I mean, y'all had the minority had 2 witnesses come in here. It was fascinating, though, when we went back to their statements on the Trump impeachment, they talked about policy, one of them, even policy is a justification for impeachment. But of course, now that it's this situation, that's not the case. And I actually played the podcast. So, I played it on the overhead. So this is a disagreement. But I genuinely believe at the core of who I am, when you take an oath to defend that Constitution, that means the principle of the Constitution of separation of powers is entertained. And I quoted earlier, or someone quoted earlier, a case where lawlessness is not, one of the founders said it, I think it was Madison, not acceptable. And so, I know we disagree, but in my heart of hearts, if this was a Republican, I'd be doing the same thing. And I yield back to Mr. Crane.
I yield.
Gentleman yields. Are there any other members who wish to speak on Mr. Menendez? You're recognized for 5 minutes to speak on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to yield to my colleague from New York, Dan Goldman.
Thank you, Mr. Menendez. Mr. Chairman, you had an opportunity to address a Republican subject to impeachment. And at the time of Donald Trump's first impeachment, you made a number of statements talking about the high bar for high crimes and misdemeanors, that this did not meet it. And let's just review the facts. I'll let you respond.
Okay. I just wanted to know which one you were talking about, because there were 2 impeachments last time. One with a steel dust.
I'm talking about
turned out to be false, and then the January.
Okay, it's my time, and I'm happy to address.
I just wanted you to clarify which you were.
Because I hear you and many of your colleagues completely misrepresenting what that impeachment was about. That impeachment did not include, rely upon, or have anything to do with the Steele dossier. Go look it up, Mr. Bishop. It did not. It absolutely did not. It started with Rudy Giuliani in Ukraine doing Donald Trump's bidding to try to extort the president of Ukraine to open an investigation that would help Donald Trump's political reelection chances. Now, whatever you think of whether that rises to a high crime or misdemeanor, it was clear, based on a bipartisan vote in the Senate, that Donald Trump used the power of his office purely for his own personal gain. He did not use it for any official purposes. And even one of his lawyers went on the Senate floor and tried to make the argument that whatever is in Donald Trump's personal interest is in the national interest, and that's why impeachment should not apply.
You're saying I said that?
No, I said one of his lawyers.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
So that scenario, no matter if you want to misrepresent the Steele dossier or any of the other red herrings that you all cite, showed an official using his official duties for his personal gain, just like every single other impeachment in the history of the United States. And so what we have here is an official acting in his official capacity for the benefit of the public interest, as he has done for his 22-year career in government service. And you like to quote Ms. Pearlstein on the other side of the aisle, I believe talking about your made-up, fabricated article of impeachment of breaching the public trust, and that she said that actually could be an article of impeachment. And what she said is, offenses against the public trust are instances in which an official is willfully acting for his own benefit or the benefit of his own power or on behalf of a foreign power, which of course was what the framers were worried about when they talked about unworthy men who would take bribes from foreign governments when they created, as Mr. McCall said, what is now the Department of State. So we could disagree on what's going on at the border. We can disagree about how to solve it. That's what Congress is about, and that's what the Senate is going through right now to give the administration the authorities that it needs to be able to address the situation at the border. But you are sitting there saying that he is violating the law by failing to detain every single person who comes over the border when they do not have, what do you mean false, Mr. Bishop? It's in the articles of impeachment. You just listed 7 of them. He cannot put them all in detention because they don't have the funding, the resources, or the beds to do it. You are trying to hold Secretary Mayorkas to a puritanical standard that you have never held anyone else to before, including Donald Trump, who let 1 million migrants go in the United States while he was president. And yet, you say that only when Secretary Mayorkas does it
Gentleman's time
does
has
it rise to the level
Gentleman's
of
time has expired. Is there anyone further who would like to comment on the amendment in the nature of the substitute? Ms. Clark, you are recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I have materials that I'd like to have ask unanimous consent to include in the record. It's an article from the constitutional law expert, Mr. Frank Bowman, entitled "Republicans are Calling to Impeach Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. Here's why their case is bunk." That explains quite well why, and I quote, "there's no case for impeaching Secretary Mayorkas."
Without objection, so ordered.
Very well. And I yield time now to Mr. Ivey.
Thank you.
Mr. Ivey is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to follow up on some of the comments that Mr. Goldman made. But with respect to this breach of the public trust article that's in the articles of impeachment, I just want to refer to what Mike Chertoff wrote, who was the predecessor for Mr. Mayorkas. And I suppose by the standard that the committee's talking about now, he could have been impeached because he wasn't able to stop everybody else crossing the border either. But he points out, since Mr. Mayorkas took office, the majority of migrants encountered at the southwest border have been removed, returned, or expelled. In fact, since the pandemic-era Title 42 policy was ended last May, DHS removed, returned, or expelled more non-citizens than in any 5-month period in the past 10 years. The truth is that our national immigration system is outdated, and DHS leaders under both parties have done their best to manage our immigration system without adequate congressional support. He goes on to say that he doesn't agree with every policy decision made by the Biden administration. There are aspects of immigration strategy that are worthy of debate. But House Republicans are ducking difficult policy work and hard-fought compromise. Impeachment is a diversion from fixing our broken immigration laws and giving DH the resources needed to secure the border. In your initial comments, Mr. Chairman, you referenced somebody mentioning that H.R. 2 was in Schumer's trash can. That was me. You left out, though, that I also said that H.R. 2 was in McConnell's trash can, too. Mm-hmm. And both of them said, when H.R. 2 was passed, that it was too radical for them to take up. So when you all talked about why they're doing it in the Senate and not sharing it with you, it's because they had to start from scratch. H.R. 2 was so extreme.
Would
and
the gentleman yield?
Not yet.
Okay.
You rejected every amendment, not you personally, but the Republicans voted down every amendment that they offered, even though you, on some instances, said, there might be some merit in that. That's why they rejected it. So they're starting from scratch over there because of what they got from us, well, really, House Republicans on this committee. And then on top of that, I just listened to Senator Langford's comments over the weekend. I don't know him, not familiar with him. He sure didn't sound like a liberal to me. But he really did sound like he was deeply concerned about what's going on at the border. He sounded like he had deep Republican roots. He sounded like he had constituents that were worried about what's going on there. But he's anxious and working hard to pass legislation that can make a difference, which is what we've been requesting here, too. And if it's all right with...
Would the gentleman yield?
It's my time, Mr.
Yes, it is. He's
Clark, would
yielding
you
back
yield
to you.
to additional time to me, please?
Mr. Goldman.
Thank
Mr. Goldman, you're recognized.
Thank you. We hear a lot from my Republican colleagues today about how this is our only option. And in fact, if you go to the Articles of Impeachment, page 15, it says, in light of the inability of injured parties to seek judicial relief, impeachment is Congress's only viable option. That's funny. I thought Congress was supposed to pass legislation. I thought Congress was supposed to address the problems in this country through legislation. And I'm not the only one who thinks that, nor are House Democrats the only ones who think that. Senate Democrats think that. Senate Republicans think that. And the President of the United States thinks that. So there are 5 entities that are involved in the legislating process. 4 of them agree that we need to pass legislation. 1, the House Republicans are doing everything they can at Donald Trump's direction to sabotage any legislation because you don't want solutions, you just want politics. And I yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired. I recognize Mr. Garbarino for 5 minutes to discuss the amendment in the nature of